Hi everyone, Dave Thomas here again, and today I'm building the LOC Precision Hi-Tech as part of its LOC1 series. Now, if you're like me, you may know the Hi-Tech from their high power line. And when I first saw this, as I was scrolling through a Rocketry website, I said, wow, there's a Hi-Tech for less than 20 bucks. And then I had to read carefully. This is a downsized version of the classic high power model. And one of the other things that was a little bit strange about this was that they don't include an instruction sheet. Instead, you get a sheet that has some QR codes and website links on here. And if you go to the bottom one, you can download and print off your own instruction sheet. And it's not very detailed. Okay, now it also shows building video reference guide. And I clicked on that, and it's kind of some general construction techniques, but not for this particular rocket. So I'm going to go with the sheet here, and this is why I'm making this video that will pertain specifically to this rocket. Okay, so they don't have the usual list of stuff that comes in the rocket kit, but as we go through here, so we have a body tube here that is pre-slotted for the fins. And this uses through-the-wall fins just like its big brother does. A second body tube, this will be the payload section. A coupler, which will make up the part of the bulkhead for the payload section. Motor mount tube, and so this uses standard 18mm low-power motors. We've got a nose cone, and then two little bags here. This one contains a nylon streamer as well as a Kevlar shock cord. And then in here we've got the fins, which are made out of thin plywood, centering rings, an engine block, engine clip, launch lug, and then the plywood bulkhead here. This will go to make up the separation between the body tube and the payload section. And then a sheet of decal material. This will have to be cut out individually if you want individual different decals in different parts of the rocket. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to clear this away and we'll start on the build. Now we get this kind of cartoonish instruction sheet here, and this really assumes that you've built a few model rockets before because it doesn't show a lot of detail. So we're going to start with our motor mount tube, and we're going to need the engine clip and centering rings and engine block here. Okay, and so the first thing we need to do is mark our engine tube from the top. Sorry, it bounced us around a little bit there. Okay, so 1/4 inch from the forward end. This is where the engine clip will be inserted, so right there. And then we just need to make a slit there with our hobby knife. Okay, and then the front end of the clip simply inserts into there. Okay, now, next this is showing the centering rings going on. And so this first one just goes right over the clip like this, and I haven't glued anything yet. Alright, and the aft one, they really don't show exactly where it needs to be. Okay, so I'm going to first of all just slide this on to get an idea of where we want it. They do warn you that we don't want it to interfere with the fin tabs. And that's because if we look at our body tube here, there has to be enough clearance between the two centering rings here that when it's inserted into the body tube that we don't interfere with the slots here. And so the width between these two has to be wider than the slot. Now personally, I like to have in these types of rockets the width between my centering rings exactly this distance, because then you can glue the edges of the fin tabs onto the actual edges of the centering rings here. So it would fit in something like this. Okay, and then this would be on here, so when this goes inside, there should be just enough clearance for the fin to fit in between them, like that. And that locks everything in. Now here I don't want my motor mount sticking out this far, as it's going to set my center of gravity back too far. Okay, so we probably won't be able to do it exactly that way. I am going to bring this down. Okay, so I'm going to have to settle for at least having my back centering ring able to come up there. Okay, now the other problem we're going to run into is the further back this centering ring is, the harder it is to move that engine clip out of the way. And so that's why I'm kind of disappointed here that they don't have a clear direction on where this needs to be. Okay, so subsequent illustrations here appear to indicate that this, the aft end of the motor mount, should be flush with the aft end of the rocket. Okay, that's going to mean this ring here is going to be so far back it's going to be really hard to get a little movement out of there. So I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to cut a little slot on the inside of this centering ring. Not very deep, but just enough to give me a little bit more clearance. Okay, so now I've got a notch in there, so that now when this fits over, it's just got a little bit more play there. Okay, and I can also slide this one farther down, so that that helps keep the clip in place even though it's got some play down here. Okay, so now if I measure this against here, if I want to keep that flush, all right, now I can actually start to get down to where maybe that, yeah, we can do this. Okay, and actually have this in between there. So if I now slide this in, okay. Okay, so I can adjust this as needed. Now, okay, so now that ring is just at that edge and the other ring is just at this edge, and this is flush. So now I'm going to take it out and glue those into place in those two places. Okay, so first I'm going to once again check this. Okay, and now I can mark it off. So I am flush with the two ends. I want that ring to be right there at the edge. Okay, and I want this ring pretty much right where it is. So I'm going to mark it right there. Okay, so now I can just move that ring up a little bit and apply some glue to it. Alright, and then I'm just going to fill it all the way around into a fillet, like that. Remove anything from the outside of the ring, and then anything that's still left on my finger I'll just put on the forward edge here. Okay, and now I'm going to just move that forward to my mark. Okay, and I'm actually going to let it, if you notice I moved it till the glue hit the mark there. Because that little bit of glue, if I force the ring forward, that little bit of glue is going to interfere with where the fins are going to attach, so I don't want an edge there. And then the same thing back here. Here I can move it this way. And I could have done this on the other side too. Just put it on the other side and move it out. That way we wouldn't have any possibility of interfering glue. But it's already done. Okay, so now I'm just going to move this until the inside edge is flush with my mark. As soon as I find my mark again. There it is. Okay, so right there. Okay, now again, I'm going to make sure I don't have glue on the outside of the ring itself. I'm going to compare this to what I had. So those are just outside. Alright, I'm going to slide this in carefully. But I don't want to glue it quite yet. Alright, so one ring edge is right there, the other is right in there. Okay, so I'm going to slide that back out. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. And the next thing we need to do is work on the shock cord because it ties into the motor here. The glue on my centering rings is dry enough that we can handle it here. It's not completely dry. And the next thing we're going to do is attach the Kevlar shock cord onto the motor mount. Now this, I can't quite tell what they're doing with that. Somehow they're going from a single hitch knot to a double loop. I'm just going to make this easier for us. Okay, so what we're going to do is first just tie a loop in this with an overhand fisherman's knot. Doesn't need to be a big loop. In fact, a small loop is better. Okay, we just need a little eye loop there. Now, Kevlar, for all its virtues as being very strong and fire resistant, tends to unravel like this really easily. And so I recommend taking just a little bit of super glue and use that to seal the end. So to do this, just use some of the kind of regular consistency super glue here. And just touch a drop to it here. Let it soak into the fibers. And then use a little bit of tissue or paper towel now to wipe it out. Okay, you can try and draw it together here. It really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. We just don't want it to keep unraveling. Okay. You can also do the same thing with the knot that we just tied in here. Just add a little drop there. Let it soak into the knot for a moment. And then just absorb the excess here. You can work with it almost immediately. Alright, now take the other end of the Kevlar, stick it through the loop, and now you've got a little lasso here, and we're going to lasso this. Okay, so here I'm just going to tie that right up against there. Alright, and this is showing installing this pretty much as is. You may, and I recommend doing this, want to put just a little notch in that forward centering ring. Doesn't need to be very wide or very deep, just enough for that to fit through. Okay, so just like that. Now if you want here, you can go ahead and glue this. You can run a bead of glue right next to that centering ring there. You can also cut off this part here that you applied the super glue to, if it's getting up in the way there. And I'm going to go ahead and do that because I think it's just going to interfere later on. Okay. So now there, we're back in the notch. I'm going to go ahead and pull this around so it's straight. Alright, so right there. As I said, if you want to go ahead and just add a little touch of glue to that, you can. Now I recommend letting this glue dry right here where it is for a little bit before you stick it inside, so that this does not come undone from the notch there. Now if it does, you know, they're assuming that this is not going to cause a big enough bulge to be a construction problem. And so if you just follow their little cartoon here, they're just pulling this on through. Okay. Now, if you had done a wider separation here between the two centering rings, that would give you an even better anchor for the shock cord, because it wouldn't be interfering over here with this tube. I don't think it's going to cause any problem, but that would be one reason not to put the centering rings the way I did it. And this is going to be kind of personal preference. Now while I'm waiting for that, I can go ahead and put in the engine block, because that's just going to go in the forward end here and rest up against the engine hook. So I can just add a little bit of glue here. I'm just going to use my finger to move it around. We just don't want any glue down below the engine hook there. So I had a little, take that out, because that might interfere with the engine. Okay, so now I'm just going to pop this in. Alright, and it should rest. The instructions show just doing it flush, that's fine. If you want, you can rest it up against the engine hook. That'll actually be stronger. Okay, so just like that, and we'll let that dry. And we'll let this dry. And once everything's dry again, we'll stick this into the body tube. While I'm waiting for the motor mount and shock cord to dry, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the payload section. So you'll need the little coupler here, this bulkhead, and the little tiny screw eye. And the first thing we'll do is simply put a little dab of glue into the hole in the bulkhead here. And then we'll screw the screw eye into that until we get to the end of the threads. Okay, so about there. And then I'm going to just go and place a little dab of glue on top of where it protrudes out the other side. Now this whole thing is going to go into right here. So right at the end of this coupler, like that. And so here I'm going to put in a bead of glue again. Even that out with my finger. Okay, and now I'm going to put this in an angle and then pop it forward. Okay, and then pull it back into the glue. And I'm going to push it in so there's just a little bit of a lip there. And now I'll just spread the glue around that into a very shallow fillet. Okay, and then just clear off the glue from the outside. And then we need to measure this, which is right at about 5 centimeters. And so we make a mark at 2.5 centimeters. And then this will get glued up to that point. So here I'm going to put in another bead of glue. And now as I insert this, I'm just going to rotate it back and forth, and this is going to help ensure that we have glue throughout the length there. And then this whole thing can be set aside to dry. The nose cone will just fit right on here, and you'll want to make sure that this is a good snug fit. The nose cone is nice and smoothly finished. Really not even a seam on it, although there's this little tiny point where they injected the plastic. You might want to just shave that off. It's a little imperfection. So if you like the color, you can just leave this unpainted. If you want a different color, use some fine or extra fine sandpaper to take the gloss off here, and the paint will adhere better. But this will normally just sit up here, and you've got a payload section. You could stick an altimeter in there, or crickets, or whatever. Alright, so I'm going to set that aside to dry. And now we come back to our motor mount here. That's dried enough to keep it from moving about. Okay, so here we're going to try something here. They're showing just threading the Kevlar shock cord through the back of the body tube to the front. And theoretically it's going to come out the other end. There we go. Okay, so that will fit in here. Alright, that knot will just clear, just like that. Okay, and so this is going to fit all the way up here, and when that is flush, there we go. Again, our motor mount centering ring should be even here. Now, I don't know if you can quite see that here, if I can get close enough and get in focus. Okay, you can see the shock cord is right there at the edge of the fin slot. Okay, now if you move the centering ring forward a bit instead of putting it where I did, you won't have that problem. All you have to do here to fix that is just take a little bit of sandpaper or a small file and just very gingerly round off this corner here so that you've got a little bit of a slant, and that will accommodate that. And you'll still get the improved structural integrity of having that ring right in front of your slot fin, or your fin slot. Okay, so this would still go in right like that, and actually it doesn't have any trouble there. So once we put this in for real and glue it in, once that's set, the first thing to do is just dry fit your fins. You may not need to do anything to them. Okay, so I'm going to pull this back out again. Now the other thing I am considering, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do this, is I'm going to wrap up my shock cord here, and I'm going to stuff it down in the motor mount. And the reason I am doing this, and make sure that your engine block glue is completely dry if you do this. Okay, but the reason I'm doing this is to minimize contact between the glue that's going to go inside here and my shock cord. So I just don't get a whole lot of glue stuck in it. I might get a little bit of glue along this part, but that's not going to be that big a deal. Okay, and then once it's glued into place, I can just take a dowel or a pencil and shove this back up to where it belongs. Now to glue the engine mount into the tube, the instructions just show having glue right here around the aft end, and then putting the entire motor mount with the center rings through that in the hopes that it's going to all glue in there. I'm going to do this in 2 stages, so I'm first going to take some glue on an applicator here, and being careful not to get it behind the fin slots, I'm going to put this inside and put some glue right at the edge of the fin slots in there. Okay, and I can actually even put a little bit between. I don't want to get glue in the fin slots themselves, but if you go in between there, you can drop down some glue to right between the tops of the fin slots. It'll give more grab for the centering rings. Alright, and now I'm going to slide this in just past the aft end here. So just like that. Okay, and now I'm going to add, and this is going to be really tight here. I'm going to try a different way. I'm going to use just the stick part of my applicator here, because I just want some glue in between the fin slots right at the edge here. And I'm getting a little bit, actually I'm getting a lot on the motor mount, but that's not going to hurt anything. Make it just slightly heavier. Okay, but what I'm wanting to do is get the glue just at that aft edge. In between the slots. Okay, and now I'm going to position the clip there in between 2. Alright, now I'm just going to push this in. And you want to do this fairly quickly so that the glue doesn't set. Alright, and the motor mount should be flush with the aft end there. Alright, now I can look inside. Don't see any big glops of glue, so that looks good. Now before we put the fins on, I'm going to mark a place for the launch lug, which they don't show doing in here. They just go say, put a launch lug there. Alright, so that's showing the back edge of the launch lug even with the forward edge of the fins. Now the forward edge of the fin is not there at the slot, it's up about here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just mark a line about there, and I'm going to kind of eyeball the center here. If you're off a degree or 2, the world won't end. Okay, so now I'm going to put this on my straight edge here. You can use a door frame if you don't have one of these. And I'm just going to make a mark here for my launch lug. And that's easier to draw it in now than after you put the fins on. Now the instructions don't show any type of preparation for the fins, and they are fairly thin, so if you don't want to airfoil them or anything like that, it's probably fine. Also, they've got really fine grain, so you could probably even get away with not using any type of sanding sealer on them. Just a good coat or 2 of primer will probably fill it in nicely. If you want, you can taper the edges or round them off. I'm just going to round the edge corners just a little bit so they don't splinter. But you can easily put these on without any other preparation. It'll probably look pretty good. You might want to just sand it slightly, even if you're not tapering them or anything, to take the carbonized area off from where they laser cut them. Okay, but that's about all I'm going to do to mine here, so I'm going to do the other 2 fins and then we'll come back and put them on. I've lightly sanded all the fins, and now I'm just going to dry fit these in. Make sure they fit, so they should go in. The notched end here should be forward, and those should fit flush against the body tube and against the motor mount. If there's some wobble back and forth, like right there, that's hitting a little bit of the shock cord. So here I'm just going to take and cut off just a little corner here. And we'll try that again. Okay, that's much better. Alright, and now to glue these in, we'll simply add a bead of glue along the edges here and then place that in, and that will glue it to both the body tube on the front edge of the fin and to the motor mount on the bottom edge. And we'll let those dry, and then we'll strengthen those with fillets later on. Alright, and we can do these all at once. You just want to make sure and check that they're straight as they go in. If you have some big globs of glue here, just go ahead and kind of make those into preliminary fillets. We can add more later on. And then just go on to the next one. Okay, those look pretty straight. I'm just going to let those dry, and we'll come back later on when those are completely dry and put in the fillets and add the launch lug. So we marked the location of our launch lug a little bit earlier. So now I'm just going to go ahead and glue that into place. I'm going to put it down here at the base of the launch lug is aligned with the tips of the fins. Again, excess here we'll just kind of make into a fillet, and then we'll put in real fillets once that is dried. Alright, my fin glue is mostly dry, so I'm going to go ahead and put on the fillets here. I have some tissues handy and ready. And here we're just going to run a bead of glue down along each fin and then smooth that in with a finger. Alright, and then excess glue can be applied to the next fin. So I'm going to let this dry horizontally. I may be able to do that launch lug too. So here I had enough glue on the launch lug already that it's kind of forming its own fillet. And I'm just going to add a little bit more. And then smooth that over. Do that on both sides. That way I only have to do this once. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry horizontally so that the glue doesn't run in one direction or the other. But basically we're almost done here. I'm just going to take a dowel and poke this through here. There we go. Okay, I'm going to... That'll work. knot in here, so let's take the knot out. Alright, now coming back to our instructions. Let's get the streamer out here. And this even includes a little Nomex patch here. This is in place of disposable recovery wadding. And so this will just string on here. This seems insistent on falling over. Right, so here we'll just take, and I went ahead of time and just put a little bit of super glue on this end to keep it from unraveling, so that's why it works nicely now. Okay, so that'll just go down, and when we're ready, this kind of cups around the streamer, and we'll put it in, and then it acts like a piston to push it out again. Okay, here's our nylon streamer. And this works in a similar way. We're just going to push this through, right there like that. And so the streamer can just kind of travel along the shock cord wherever it wants to go. Alright, and now we just have to attach our payload section to the shock cord. I'm going to take the nose cone off. Oh, we're going to have to do something about that. Alright, so, and this will just pass through, and we can double knot this, leave just a little bit hanging out there so that if it slips it doesn't untie the knot, and then we can put just a little dab of wood glue or white glue on there. I've also used super glue, but they recommend just using the white glue here. Right, I'm just going to work that into the notch a little bit, into the knot, and then that'll just keep that from slipping. Alright, our nose cone I thought was one piece, and it turns out it's not. So we just need to glue this together. And here you can use either some plastic cement or some super glue. I'm going to go ahead and use plastic cement since I've got some handy here. I'm just going to run a bead right around there. Okay, then we'll just attach this and twist it in, and that'll give us a nice strong joint there as soon as it dries. Alright, so now we need the other end. Oh, here we go. Alright, so this will just fit on there. Okay, and when everything is dry, we'll just fold this up. Okay, so I'm basically just folding it up to the shape it was when it arrived in the package, and now I'll just roll this up here. Okay, and then we take our little flame-proof wadding. So you kind of make a cup of it around here. Now I'm going to take this right back out again. Alright, we'll slide that down. Put the rest of the shock cord here on top. There we go, and that can just go down there inside. And that will go like that. And this, and like I said, in my case here, this is really loose. I would put some masking tape around that. Alright, and that is the finished product. Okay, now I don't normally do painting on these videos just because it takes so long. But you can spray paint this, you could hand paint this, you could launch it naked if you wanted to. But with just a little bit of paint, this will be ready to launch very soon. And so I hope you had a good build, have a good launch, a safe recovery, and a good flight. And see you back here next time.